Hello everybody, this is Jasmina, and in this video I'm going to talk about the Jade Belt Formation. It is a Sanher formation, and if you've been watching my Sanher videos, you basically recognize this as, let's say, an extension of another concept. So basically it has to do with being on the inside of a curve of a river. But for a Jade Belt Formation, it's a little bit more precise. It's not just on the inside curve, it's under inside curve of a certain size and all that stuff. So we'll get to that. Now, roads are considered what often is considered by many people or many practitioners and masters as virtual water. It's not real water unless it fills with water. And that can happen, you know, during a big rainstorm, but that's a very temporary thing. They have a small level of energy, and I don't think you need to be worried if you are on a curve of a road, whether you're on the inside or outside of the curve. Roads are such a small energy compared to a river, you don't have to worry about it. And if you've got good stars, you're fine. Now, so don't be concerned about roads. I've basically heard at most they have about 10% of the strength of a river, and that's if they have a real slope to them. But it's more like 1 to 5%. That's more like the strength of a road compared to a river. So it's minor. Do be concerned about rivers. Rivers are mostly natural, and they they actually talk about the landforms. They flow because they have a slope. So this is something, this has to do with the land and the shape of the land. And that's what's really more important in feng shui. So when it comes to the roads, well, just look at them as their slopes. That's all. Now, riverbeds that are often dry, but not always, are not as strong as a river, but they're much stronger than roads because this is part of the natural landscape. Canals that have always have water are considered rivers because they usually have a flow, and but they tend to be quite straight because they're man-made. So that's what I mean by a canal. It's a man-made waterway. Now, most canals do not have Jade Belt formations because they tend to be quite straight. A true Jade Belt formation comes from a 90 or 90 plus degree turn in a river. You can be on the good side of a river bend and not have a Jade Belt formation if the curve is gentle enough, it's not 90 degrees. So you could have something like this. The positive side is on the inside curve. Now, one of the reasons why this is positive is because the energy, whether it's flowing this way or this way, the energy wants to push this curve farther and farther out. So you tend to have more erosion on the outside of the curve than on the inside. Although you do get erosion here because you get some eddies, but the force of the river wants to straighten it out if it can. And so if you're out here, you might end up losing your house ultimately because the river just keeps pushing farther and farther this way. But when that happens, it may turn into a Jade Belt formation for the people inside. But this is long-term stuff. But in general, when you have a flood, it floods more on this side also. So this is the negative side. And so this is just realistically looking at what happens, when you get too much water. This is an example of a Jade Belt where you have a river turn basically 90 degrees. But of course, it's always going to have a curve to it, and it never is 90 degrees in nature. I mean, not a 90-degree angle. It could be spread out farther so that this is maybe longer and flatter. If these two legs were farther apart, that could happen. So it's basically here very close to the actual curve part. This is the Jade Belt Formation region. You have to be on the inside of the curve. Now, there is also something called an oxbow river. At least that's what we call it here in the United States. I don't know if this is standard English or not, but uh, it is a unusual looking river, and of course they're never as ideal as this, but they're usually a little bit more elongated or a little bit more strangely shaped. But what happens is this piece of rock or soil here is very hard compared to the surrounding, and so it turns and but the general flow is this land slopes. Let's say if it's coming flowing in this way, the land slopes. This is high, this is low, so it wants to go back out this way, and so it just finds its way and it wants to come back out. I mean, this is this is part of a natural thing. Now, this usually happens where the land is relatively flat. It's not very steeply sloped. This is usually where you get these kind of rivers. And all you need is a little bit of a harder piece of soil here or or rock, and that will create something like this. And this isn't uncommon. I didn't want to break any copyright things for photos, so I'm just showing you a idealized thing. So anyway, this area here is a very negative area to be in. You don't want a house in here. It's on the wrong side of the curve, and it is also not going to be there forever because this will get eroded away ultimately. But in general, you have a pretty large Jade Belt Formation area. Now, I'm assuming that this is relatively flat. So if you're living here, you're in line with the river. And so that's still positive. If the water is coming in here, going out here, any houses here are still positive, especially if they face the river, because the flow is the correct direction. But that overrides the Jade Belt because this is another form of good energy. So, but if you're over here and your house faces this outgoing, this is a negative thing, and so that also overrides the Jade Belt. So this is why it has a kind of a strange formation for the area that's Jade Belt. Now, the thing is, this will get eroded away ultimately, and then all these houses are on the wrong side of the river. So that's not good. Now, the houses here don't really have the Jade Belt Formation until this happens. Then the houses right near here would. Now, this is also called an oxbow lake. And if you want to see real things in nature, just Google Oxbow River and you'll find it. And there's actually a pretty good photo that shows both a river and oxbow lakes at the same time. So this is a pretty good one, but just Google it. You'll be able to find this. It comes up in the first page, or at least it does for me. Now, if you happen to have a hill here that blocks the view of the river, then these houses here aren't so negatively affected. Because the hill blocks the view of the river, they aren't really on the wrong side of the river. I mean, they are, but the hill will take the energy, not the house. But they no longer have the Jade Belt Formation because they've lost it, because this is now a lake. This does not have a flow to it. And in general, these things will slowly silt in until it's just a low area, and there's no water that sits there normally. And they may get down to a very small area and then vanish. That's how nature works. But this is very, very long. Not it doesn't happen, like in a decade. It happens over centuries. So that's it. I'm hoping that I'm hoping somebody there does happen to have the Jade Belt Formation. Of course, you're probably not listening if you do, because you probably have some really good energy, and you simply are not, uh, have no reason to watch a feng shui video. But at least you know what to look for if you are looking for a new house. Thanks again for watching.